And the year that has been a craziness for VCO Esports, it continues in 2022. We have plenty of stuff still yet to come, but we have just wrapped up the 2022 IMSA Esports Michelin Global Championship. And today we're joined by one of our champions. Kevin Ellis Jr. has had a monster 2022. It includes being the Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain Esports Champion. And Kevin, coming off a very successful 2022, now you have about 6 weeks in which you can relax and have some fun. How are you feeling here today?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. Obviously, it's nice to finally have some downtime. This season has been just full on. These esports schedules are getting busier and busier and busier every single year. As soon as you think, oh, the end of the year is looking quite quiet, all of a sudden there'll be sort of 2 or 3 championships that sort of pop up out of nowhere and sort of keep you on your toes. So, yeah, as you say, 6 weeks off. Looking forward to being able to have a little bit of fun, just doing some casual Twitch streaming stuff, and really just work away on the back end in terms of the team stuff and doing some management and stuff like that, and yeah, have a bit of a break from driving.
Like Kevin mentions, going for the road to 9K on the Twitch channel. We'll talk more about it in a moment. And Kevin and I chatted earlier this year on the RaceBot podcast Talking Tents. We dived into his background a little bit more, and we'd encourage you to go and check that out, not just because you get an appearance from Pantsless Pete, but because we're going to talk about something different here with the 20 or 25 minutes that we've got in store for us, Kevin. Let's start by recapping the IMSA Esports Michelin Global Championship. Of course, the first time in quite a while that the endurance season has had a major championship like that. What was it like for you diving into 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is a quite unusual and awkward race distance in terms of endurance racing?
Yeah, it was nice to have some endurance racing back in the pro stuff. Obviously, a lot of guys are missing the old VRS GT World Championship that we had years ago. That was always really good fun. But yeah, as you say, the 2 hours 40 race distance was a little bit different for us. Typically, you've got a sort of 3 hour, 6 hour, 12 hour sort of format, so it's fairly easy. You just get the feel to the hour, take tires, or you double stint your tires or whatever. But the 2 hours 40, you're always left with a little 45 minute oddball stint that you could sort of play around with. You could take it start, middle, or obviously at the end as well. But yeah, we had the minimum drive time and the maximum drive time to look at as well, so that, you know, sort of backed us into a corner a little bit more. And I think for the majority of the season we chose to sort of take that short stint just in the middle. It did sort of cover off some safety car potentials, which you know, IMSA obviously had, that we're not used to before, and you know, it was a new element that we had to try and prepare for and adapt to and be ready for. But yeah, I'm just so happy with the work that the guys put in, the performances that we were able to churn out every week. You know, winning all 4 races in a class that was, you know, pretty stacked with talent. When you got BS, Redline, obviously Cova were there, not anymore, but you know, all those teams like that, Urano as well, Williams, just so many talented teams, and to come away on top in all 4 of those races and be 1-2 in the championship as well was just, yeah, it's still not really sunk in. It's still pretty unbelievable, the year that we've had, but you know, we learned a lot from that IMSA series, and it's definitely stuff that we can carry into endurance races next year going forward.
It ended at least on track with 3 wins on of the 4. Post-race penalties, maybe mixing that one up a little bit more than you would have wanted. But let's talk about traffic a little bit as well, because you've had experience both being the faster and the slower class in your time. But GTD and touring cars, I think it's the first time that many had to experience those 2 classes coming together. And in some ways it felt a little bit awkward, just because of the ways the touring cars develop speed, being front-wheel drive machines.
Yeah, they were really tough to get used to. Yeah, the first couple of races were really tough because the TCR, or the TC, would probably be about 10 seconds off depending on the track really, but in a straight line and under braking they weren't actually horrible. A lot of their time lost was just mid to exit, which is right where we were able to sort of get back to full throttle. So you would try and sort of line the car up to get the cut back on the exit, and then right as you get to full throttle, the TC just hasn't moved and you're having to like lift off and try and turn away from them. And yeah, it's a different dynamic. You know, as you say, I've been in the prototype class for many years, lapping GT cars, and the time gain through a corner from LMP to GTD is fairly equal across the you know, entry, middle, and exit phases. But with TC, it really was all on exit. So yeah, it took a lot of patience to manage, especially the tighter tracks. Like Laguna was really difficult to manage. Daytona wasn't so bad. We had obviously half the track was an oval, so you had a lot of space to work with there and a lot of time to get round guys. But yeah, Laguna was, yeah, I had to breathe pretty deep, and even Road Atlanta as well. I did get caught quite a lot at Road Atlanta just because it's so tight to try and get through cars there. There's a lot of choke points, so yeah, as you say, different dynamic. But thankfully we didn't. We only had one issue with one at Indianapolis, but the rest of the season we were able to avoid any kind of dramas.
In terms of what the success you've had earlier this year, let's talk about the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain, because that was a championship that you lost last year by just 1 point. How significant was it for you to be able to go and win that championship, coming back to it, but then to go in person and to collect that trophy, in person, to go to the Porsche Experience Center as well? That must have really been the icing on the cake.
Yeah, it stung a lot, obviously, to lose by one, but I think in hindsight, this was probably the better one to win. Obviously, as you say, being able to go to the Experience Centre at Silverstone and drive a Porsche and get to sit in the 992 in real life and have Adam Smalley, who after that we actually managed to get Adam into Apex, which has been really cool. But having Adam Smalley kind of walk you around the real car, and when you sit in it and they flick the ignition on and the dashboard looks exactly how it looks in the sim. Obviously, we know that the cars are accurate, but to actually see it in person and it's just identical to the sim, it just sort of it really makes you appreciate the level of detail that iRacing are able to produce with the cars. And being able to sort of be walked around the whole centre, be provided with the trophy, get to speak to the likes of Lee Brown, the head guy behind it all, and really understand how they view esports and what they want to achieve from it. And they were able to speak to Pete and I, and we could give a little bit of feedback and help them push it even further forward, looking forward into next year and stuff. So yeah, just being able to sit down and really just pick the brains of these Porsche guys was an absolute honour. And as I say, to be out on the test track, getting thrown around in a GT3 RS and stuff like that was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. And next year I'm wanting to be back on the grid, but whether I can be able to return is one thing I need to wait and see on. So I hope I can be back on the grid, but we might need to sort of pull a bit of a Nico Rosberg and retire on top kind of thing.
Well, you say retire. I think there's more a lateral transition that we maybe talked about on the RaceBot podcast earlier. We'll get to that in a moment. I do kind of want to ask you a question, though. How successful were you in getting in and out of the 992 Cup car?
It wasn't easy. I just trying to get my leg through the roll cage was the hard one. I didn't hit my head or nothing, but my leg did get stuck a couple of times trying to get in and out of it. It's a pretty snug fit, but Adam and I are fairly similar heights, so I think it was probably more just me not being used to getting in a race car. There's definitely a little process you need to go through to actually get in there properly and not hurt yourself, but it's surprisingly comfortable as well, actually. Like, I could, as I say, with Adam and I being similar heights, I could sit in it and the pedals felt like a natural distance. You could see over the wheel fine. I was surprised with I think it was how small the pedals actually were as well. Like, I looked into the footwell and the pedals were just a lot smaller than I anticipated them to be. But as I say, getting in and out of it was certainly easier being in the sim cockpit than the real thing. But as I say, it was great to be able to sit in it and experience it.
I'm glad you were more successful in getting into the car than I was. I tried at Indianapolis, and I ended up falling backwards out of it because I'm so misproportioned with long legs, so I'm glad that at least did not happen to you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that Apex has had over the last year. It's now almost full year that this Apex facility has been, quote-unquote, either somewhat almost finished and with people working on the final touches, or people already being in it. We saw the 24 Hours of Daytona, the breakout victory, besting Coanda on pace and strategy as well. What's it been like for you behind the scenes, being a part of the process of moving in and then living there over this last year and seeing all the growth for the team and the facility as well?
Yeah, as you say, it's been nearly dead on a year since I was here. It was only, I think, maybe another 3 weeks or so now that I've been here for a year. When we first moved in, there was a lot of work to be done. We had to build all the rigs. There's still things that are a little bit unfinished, but we wanted to make sure that we could get in and help Alex and Lee sort of get everything built and ready to go for the start of the racing season. And then, as you say, I think that the start of the year really couldn't have gone any better, you know, winning the 24 Hours of Daytona and beating Kwanda at a track where they've absolutely dominated for as long as we can remember. You know, we brought a really good car, the GT car. I think that Alex, Jamie and I were in, you know, looking at the pace that was being churned out in the race. We went back out with a little bit of damage just to drive. I think we sent Alex out in the middle of the night just to go and do some laps. And yeah, we had the pace to win both classes that weekend. Obviously it's a shame that ours was ended on, I think, lap 4. That does sting a lot, but thankfully, you know, the LMPs could bring home that win, and that kind of set the tone for the year. Obviously, starter pace didn't really go quite to plan. Definitely a bit of a tough adjustment. You know, with the 24 Hours of Daytona, it wasn't a huge deal in terms of having people around you in the room, because people were sort of getting in and out at different times. But in PESC, there's sort of this added pressure, I guess, the first time of everyone being in the room and sort of in quali mode at the same time, and even just small things like seeing Pete reaching down to use his mouse and stuff like that. You could sort of tell what part of the lap they were on, and it just sort of got in your head a little bit, and that did definitely take a couple rounds to sort of shift that. But you know, we're actually talking about this in here earlier. It's amazing how quickly you adapt now. Like, we can be doing qualifying practice and people are coming in and out, walking behind the rigs, you know, doing something with their pedals or changing a cable or something, and it doesn't even bother you now. Whereas back home, if I even saw a light go under my door or something, that would kind of put me off when I was back home. So yeah, it's amazing how you adapt actually to, you know, being in an environment with so many different people. You know, there's like 6 or 7 of us that are in here every day now, and there's a lot of people moving around, a lot of things going on when you're trying to practice. But as I say, you can adjust to it fairly quickly, and you'll be amazed at sort of how you just zone everything out when you're in the car.
I can very much agree with that, because when I used to race probably 3-4 years ago and my parents were visiting me, they always used to leave when I had a race because they didn't want to distract me. So I can very much appreciate that one. But it's not just about the facility, of course, that you've seen so much growth, but Apex has continued to expand outside of not just the team. The Apex Racing TV, of course, has their studio. Apex Racing Simulators, the newest member of the Apex Racing family as well. And I do believe that you're taking on a little bit more of a responsibility and at least helping out behind the scenes across of the board.
Yeah, I mean, being in the Sim Center isn't just, you don't just come here as a driver. You know, you need to help out in a lot of different avenues. Especially recently for myself, kind of from the middle of the year on, I've sort of helped out in terms of being team leader for ART, so kind of managing the day-to-day stuff, making sure that everyone knows that they're signed up for events correctly, we've got all the paint sorted, making sure that everyone's done the right practice, that the lineups are sorted and stuff like that. And then, of course, we had the sort of academy team really start up as well, where we started bringing in development drivers to try and bring in that next level of guys that will be able to take over once our current top guys decide that either they don't want to do it anymore or they get too old. So yeah, really being one of the head guys in terms of running all the interviews for the drivers, running the trials that we put them through, and coming up with all the questions and stuff like that. Managing the academy and ART has sort of been the biggest thing for me, and everyone in here does a little bit to help out in terms of the companies. Like Peter and I do some stewarding for Apex Racing Leagues as well, which is obviously another branch that we've got. John and Jamie do broadcasting up in the studio for ARTV. So, you know, we're all sort of broadening our skill sets and jumping into different things that we wouldn't normally do. You know, we're not just drivers here. We do a lot of other stuff. So, yeah, plenty to keep you busy, that's for sure.
And I'm just saying, if you want to explore this topic more about full-time sim racers not always being full-time racers, I've got a great article about this in the upcoming edition of VCO Send It. At least, I think it's a great article. In terms, though, about the Academy, this was something that I think both of us are very excited about. You kind of went from an oval racer to a road course specialist in the inaugural edition of the Apex Racing Academy, but it's relaunched now, and it's been going for over a year, and several drivers have promoted themselves to the Apex Racing team, but I think there was one signing in particular, I think either over the last week or the last 2 weeks, that caught my eye in particular, because we discussed this earlier this year. You have an interest in going back oval racing and maybe going and jumping into contention for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series.
It's always been on the list. I've always wanted to sort of branch out and not just sort of back myself into a corner with road racing. You know, the opportunities that are available in the Coke series is obviously huge. You know, not just the prize pool, but even just you saw what they'd done for the finale of that series, where they actually got to go to, is it the NASCAR Hall of Fame that they went to in Carolina somewhere, and they all got to compete there in person. I mean, it's pretty cool, and they all got to have their own rigs shipped out there as well, which is for us is it's a huge reason as to why I'm not a huge fan of LAN events. Like, I don't really like the whole being shipped there and everyone using the same stuff. If we can take our own simulators and sort of get used to all that, then that's a different story. But yeah, like being able to have a go at NASCAR at some point is still on the list. It's really tough to do though, because the road stuff, it's hard to walk away from. It's an all year round kind of thing from January through to November. You're pretty much flat out with events, and I don't really want to try and go and do NASCAR. Maybe not qualify, and potentially have a couple rough months on road and lose out on some prize money, or even let the team down in terms of results. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. Maybe even if I just dabble into like the NASCAR iRacing Series races, just to try and build my oval iRating back up again and sort of scratch that itch that I've had for the last couple of years. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully Parker can give me some pointers, and I'll give him some pointers on road, and we'll see how we go.
Yeah, that's Parker White, the newest member of the Apex Racing Academy and one of the drivers in the eNASCAR Contender Series. Of course, Kevin has competed at the front of the iRacing Indianapolis 500, even going back to, 2020 was the most recent attempt that you had, so by no means inexperienced at turning left. I want to dive into something, though, that you just said there, talking about LANs, because, of course, hopefully, we may see some of the Apex Racing team drivers in our upcoming Esports Racing World Cup in Germany, middle of February. You talk about not liking LAN environments, but with 3 years of not having any LAN environments, have you gotten very used to as well competing at home? Because it's such a different switch around now, having experienced the energy of live events twice. The distractions, I'm sure, are somewhat similar to what you guys have in the facility, but there's a palpable tension that I always enjoy with LAN events.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the environment that I'm against. I don't really find it distracting to have people standing behind the rig watching, like as you say, it happens here, where you have guys sort of walking around filming you, taking pictures, or maybe they just want to stand and watch and see if they can learn something when you're practicing. It's more just the logistics of LAN events that I find really difficult to wrap my head around. It's not like a CSGO or Call of Duty where you just need to take a keyboard, mouse, and that's it sort of thing. There's a lot that goes into a sim rig. If you rock up to an event and you're used to racing on 144 hertz, to have 20 rigs or however many rigs you decide to have with that kind of equipment, it's not cheap. Like sim racing LAN events are going to be way more expensive than most other events going, just in terms of logistics. So, if we can take our own rigs, I'm fine with it. But again, the costs are pretty hefty to take a 4-screen simulator. For us, we've got 2 PCs, direct drive, pedals, wheel rims. There's a whole load that goes into sim rigs that just trying to logistically make it happen is very, very difficult, and that's the problem that I run into with it. I don't like going to an event being on 60 hertz on a non-direct drive wheel or a non-load cell brake, because at that point it's it's just whoever can adapt to the equipment the quickest, which I guess you can argue is part of it, but it's kind of like taking an F1 driver and stick him in a go-kart with broken steering and seeing who can win it. Just to me, it's not very appealing. So
we'll wrap things up, Kevin, with a few questions about what's left for this year and what you're looking forward to next year. Of course, relatively quiet in terms of serious official competitions, but you'll be busy away on Twitch trying to grind your iRating and get up above, I think you said 9,000 was the target before the end of the year.
Yeah, official racing's not really something I've been a huge fan of in recent years. There's that many pro events that really do scratch the itch that official events just can't really, or official races just don't really do the same for me. But with how iRating inflation's going nowadays, and with the new LMDH on the way, the class sizes for Daytona 24 are going to get a little bit smaller, so making top split is not necessarily a cert, even with a sort of 8K iRating average. So making sure that we can all keep on pushing our iRatings up towards 9,000-10,000, making sure that we're up there where we need to be, making sure that we don't need to sort of try and farm last minute before an event to try and get the iRating. It's that's something that we try to avoid. So might as well take a couple weeks, do a little bit of live streaming on my own account, and also on the new Apex Racing Team Twitch account that we're doing, which is where we're trying to sort of fill it in 7 days a week live on that account at some point. Hopefully for the start of next year we'll have a schedule set up to where, as I say, that account will be live 7 days a week, and there'll be something to watch from an Apex member every day of the week. But yeah, as I say, we take these couple of weeks, prepare now before we all sort of cool down for Christmas, and then come back and start getting back up to speed again. And the iRating's already sitting there. You don't need to come home and start trying to panic about getting your iRating up. So yeah, hopefully do a little bit of Twitch streaming. Streaming pro events is, I understand it's not great to watch for people because they don't get to interact with us because we're all just sort of laser focused on the screen and not really talking to chat. So hopefully, people can get to know us a little bit better through my own Twitch account and obviously the Apex one as well. And we'll see how we go. Hopefully hit that 9K without too many issues and have a little bit of fun along the way.
I'm just saying, if you need fun, we've got VCO Pro Sim Infinity on December 9th and 10th if you really want to have all sorts of mad chaos. 2023 then, of course, another year of the Porsche Esports Tag Heuer Super Cup, which will commence early in 2023. I'm sure, hopefully, looking to defend your IMSA Esports Michelin Global Championship as well, and potentially jumping back in to defend that Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain crown. But what else are you looking for? Thoughts about eNASCAR maybe there as well, but I'm sure there's some expectations and some goals that you've got for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing with esports is the calendars are never really set until quite close to the time. Was it around June or July? We didn't even know that the IMSA thing was really going to happen. It just sort of popped up. So it's hard to really plan for next year. Obviously, as you say, the Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup is the big one for the first half of the year. I've come so close to being in that championship contention, and last year I think was the year. Round one just didn't really get off to a good start, but then somehow managed to string together like 17 top 10s in a row and drag myself back into contention. But me and Monza, every year we seem to have issues that just get shunted off by someone at some point, and there's not really much I can do about it. So hopefully next year, obviously the car has changed a lot, so that's going to give me plenty to work on over the off season, is getting back on top of that again and getting used to the changes that have been made. Hopefully be back on the PESC GB grid as well, but again that's still up in the air a little bit. And the start of next year is sort of up in the air for a lot of us at the minute. We just don't really know what we're going to be doing. It's that sort of crazy off-season, silly season, I think is what they call it. We're all sort of in silly season at the minute where a lot of things are getting finalised, and we just need to wait and see really. But yeah, as you say, like PESC is going to be the main one the first half of the year. Hopefully the IMSA championship can come back again. We can defend our challenge, and then if BMW Sim Cup is still on, that'll be another one for us. All the special events and anything else that we think that we can rock up and really compete at the front of and show our best hand, and we'll be just getting stuck right into it.
Speaking of the BMW Sim GT Cup, we're going to finish with a couple of the chat questions here, and there was a really interesting one. You grabbed victory in both the BMW Sim GT Cup and the IMSA Esports Michelin Global Championship on the same day. Different cars, different tracks. How easy is it for you, or how difficult is it for you, to prepare for an event like that when there's such a short turnaround between the two races?
It's certainly not easy. The key thing is just planning ahead for us. Obviously, as I said earlier, it's not just driving is all that we do. We've still got the Apex Racing Academy data packs we need to do, and they do take up a lot of time, especially for myself. I've got 4 of them, so each pack it's a good couple hours work every single week to get one out. So we had to make sure that when we saw that clash on that day, we had to make sure that data packs were done a couple of weeks in advance. All the videos and everything were done. Any kind of management stuff that had to be dealt with was dealt with before that week, and I could just sort of spend that time sort of going back and forward. Thankfully, the first round of IMSA was at Road Atlanta, and we'd just done Petit Le Mans, so a lot of the practice, to be honest, we didn't even touch the Porsche at Road Atlanta until the day before the race, because we knew the setup was there. The balance of performance was the same as it was, so we didn't have to change the setup depending on extra ballast or less ballast or anything like that. So we kind of knew what to expect there. The focus really did go into the BMW Sim Cup that week, just to make sure that we could get as many cars into that sim final as possible, and obviously just try and maximize the results. And then into IMSA, it's sort of, we carried on where we left off at Petit Le Mans, which is really good. Obviously Alejandro was insane for the first half of that race and left me a pretty easy job. So yeah, I mean, the key thing when you've got clashes on a weekend is just making sure that you plan a couple of weeks ahead, make sure that all your work is done so that you can give yourself a week and a half slot to just practice on those 2 races and just try and be smart about what you're doing. And thankfully for us, we've been doing it so long now, you can get up to speed pretty quickly. It can take only a couple hours to really get into the groove of it, so that takes a lot of pressure off as well. Obviously, if you know what you're doing, then get up to speed fairly quickly. But yeah, it wasn't an easy week, but yeah, definitely a very memorable one at the same time.
And I'm sure in some ways it's easier than it was last year when you were trying to compete across different disciplines in the iRacing Rallycross World Championship. Thanks for joining us, Kev. Busy year for you, but I'm sure you'll enjoy this holiday season with lots of success in the year and hopefully another successful 2023. I've heard there's lots of big plans behind the scenes that of course you can't talk about, but thank you so much for joining us here on the VCO Esports Studio. It's going to wrap things up for us though here. Thank you for joining us live on twitch.tv/VCO Esports or on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget the VCO Esports Studio is live hopefully every Tuesday as we navigate our way around the sim racing world. We'll be back next week with another interesting guest. For now, for the team at VCO, for Mike Yao behind the scenes, my name is Arjuna Kankipati saying so long for now. We'll see you next time. Race on.